I woke up in a hospital bed with tubes in my arm and a machine beeping next to my head, and somewhere across the city, my mother was standing inside my apartment without my permission. I had not given her a key, I had not called her, I had not asked for help. But there she was, inside the place I had built slowly and carefully over 4 years, going through drawers I paid for, sitting at a table I carried up 3 flights of stairs by myself. I did not know any of this while I was fighting a fever that had almost taken me. I only found out when I got home, weak and still shaking, and saw what she had done. The worst part was not what she took. The worst part was what she left behind. Before I tell you everything that happened, I want to ask you something honest. If you came home from the worst week of your life, sick and exhausted and barely able to stand, and discovered that the one person who was supposed to love you unconditionally had gone through your private space without asking, what would you do? Would you forgive it quietly? Would you say nothing to keep the peace? Or would you finally say the thing you had been swallowing for years? Think about that while I walk you through exactly what Patricia went through, because this story will ask you that question more than once. My name is Patricia, and I am 31 years old. I live in a one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a building in a mid-sized city that is far enough from where I grew up that most people in my daily life have never met my mother. That distance was not an accident. It was a decision I made slowly over many years, one small step at a time, the way you back away from something dangerous when you do not yet know exactly how dangerous it is. I want to start there at the beginning of the distance, so you understand what came before the hospital, before the broken into apartment, before the moment everything fell apart and then somehow landed in a completely different place than I expected. Growing up, my mother was the kind of woman who could make any room feel smaller just by walking in. Her name is Donna. She is 56 years old and she has lived her whole life in the same neighborhood where she was born, 4 blocks from her own mother's house, which is now empty. She raised me mostly alone after my father left when I was 7. She worked 2 jobs for a while, and I know that was hard. I am not pretending it was not. But I also know that somewhere inside the difficulty of those years, something in Donna decided that her sacrifice had purchased her permanent rights over my life. Not just influence, not just input. Rights. Full access, full credit, full presence, and no doors that were allowed to stay closed to her. When I was little, I thought that was just what love looked like. I thought mothers were supposed to know everything about you, open your mail, listen to your phone calls from the next room, walk into your bedroom without knocking, and borrow things without asking because the word borrow implied something was yours to begin with. And in Donna's worldview, very little truly belonged to me. When I started earning my own money at 16, working at a bakery on weekends, she had a list of things she needed my help with, not requests. A list, written on a notepad and handed to me on a Friday afternoon like a business transaction. I gave her money because I felt guilty. I gave her money because she cried when I said no. I gave her money because somewhere inside me was a 7-year-old girl who still remembered the day my father drove away and wanted to make sure that if I was good enough and helpful enough and present enough, the people I loved would not leave again. I was 23 when I moved out for the first time. I had saved money for 2 years and taken a job in a city 3 hours away. The day I told Donna I was leaving, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at her coffee cup for a very long time without speaking. Then she said that she had sacrificed everything for me. She said she had given up her whole life. She said she had thought we would always be a team. I sat across from her and felt the familiar weight of that guilt settle on my chest, and I nearly said I would stay. But something had shifted in me by then. Something had gotten quieter and more certain. I had started to see the pattern, not just feel it, but actually see it. I had started to notice that every conversation about my future ended with a detour back to her feelings. Every plan I made was measured first against how it would affect her. Every success I celebrated had to be acknowledged as something she had contributed to, or the celebration was interrupted until that acknowledgement happened. I moved anyway. I packed my things into a car I had bought with my own money, gave Donna a long hug, cried in her driveway, and drove 3 hours away to an apartment I had found and signed a lease for by myself. I called her every week. I sent money when I could. I came home for holidays. I tried. I genuinely tried to maintain something real between us that was not built entirely on proximity and guilt. And for a while it worked in the way that certain things work when you do not look too closely. The years between 23 and 29 were the years I built my actual life. I got promoted twice at the logistics company where I started as an entry-level coordinator. I took night classes and earned a certificate in supply chain management. I made friends who did not know my mother's name and who saw me as Patricia, not as Donna's daughter. I learned to cook real food in my own kitchen. I furnished a space entirely based on what I actually liked. I paid my own bills and did not ask anyone for help, and I am not saying that to sound impressive. I am saying it because every time I did something like that, I felt a tiny piece of the guilt loosen its grip on my chest. The apartment I lived in by the time I was 28 was the one I had worked hardest for. 2-bedroom unit, third floor, good building, decent neighborhood. I paid to have it painted the colors I wanted. I bought actual furniture, not secondhand, not borrowed, not received as a loaded gift. I had a bookshelf full of books I had chosen. I had a kitchen stocked with things I cooked from. I had a small balcony where I sat in the evenings and drank tea and thought about things that had nothing to do with anyone's expectations of me. It was mine. It was the first place in my life that felt unconditionally mine. Donna had visited twice. Both times, she walked through every room commenting on what she would have done differently. Both times, she opened my refrigerator and my cabinets as if she were conducting an inspection. Both times, she asked why I did not have more family photographs on the walls, and both times she meant photographs of her. She stayed for one weekend each visit and left behind a particular emotional residue that took me several days to shake. After the second visit, I told her gently that I needed more notice before she came, that I needed her to call first, and that when she visited, I needed her to treat it like a visit and not like an inspection. She cried. She said I was making her feel like a stranger. She said she had not raised me to be cold. But I held the boundary and she adjusted, slowly and resentfully, but she adjusted, and the visits became less frequent and slightly less difficult. I did not give Donna a key to my apartment. I want to say that plainly because it matters. She asked once. I said no. I explained that I needed my own space to feel fully mine and that if something ever happened where she needed to get in, she could call me and we would figure it out together. She did not like that answer, but she accepted it, or I thought she had. What I did not know until much later was that the building manager, a man named Gerald who had been in his position for many years and who happened to have grown up near Donna's neighborhood, had encountered her once in the parking lot when she came to drop something off for me. They had a conversation I was not present for. I do not know exactly what was said. But somewhere in that exchange, Donna had made herself seem close enough to me, trustworthy enough, family enough, that Gerald had made a mental note that she was someone who could be given access in an emergency. The emergency happened in November. I was 29. I had been feeling off for several days, that creeping wrongness in your body where you feel slightly behind yourself, like you're running at 80% and everything costs more effort than it should. I thought it was stress. I was managing a complicated project at work and sleeping badly and not eating enough, and I told myself I just needed a good weekend. I did not get a good weekend. On a Thursday evening, I developed a fever that climbed steadily through the night despite the medication I took. By Friday morning, I could not stand without the room tilting sideways. My neighbor, a woman named Carmen who was 60 years old and had a habit of checking on the people around her, knocked on my door at 9 in the morning because she had not heard me leave for work. When I opened the door, she took one look at me and told me we were going to the hospital. I was admitted within 2 hours. My temperature was high enough that the nurses moved quickly and asked questions seriously. I had a severe infection, the kind that had been ignored long enough to become something the doctors used the word systemic to describe. They put me on IV antibiotics and kept me for observation. I was alone in that hospital room for the first 12 hours except for Carmen, who stayed until they told her I was stable and then came back twice more over the weekend to check on me. I did not call Donna immediately. I want to be honest about that. I did not call her because I did not want the kind of presence she would bring. I was already exhausted and physically vulnerable, and I knew from years of experience that Donna in a crisis meant Donna at the center of a crisis. I texted her the second day. I told her I was in the hospital, that I was being treated, that I was going to be okay, and that I would call her when I felt strong enough to talk. That was the message I sent. What happened next I did not know about until I came home 4 days later. What I know now, pieced together from Carmen's account, from Gerald's eventual uncomfortable explanation, and from what I saw with my own eyes when I walked through my front door, is this. On the second day I was in the hospital, Donna drove 3 hours from her city to mine. She did not call me, she did not ask if she could come. She went directly to my building and spoke to Gerald. She told him her daughter was in the hospital and she was worried, and she needed to check on the apartment to make sure everything was okay, the windows, the stove, the plants. Gerald gave her access. He let her into my building and he stood outside while she went in with a copy of the master key, and then he went back to his office because he trusted her and thought he was being helpful. She was inside my apartment for more than 2 hours. I know this because Carmen, who had my number and had been checking in on me regularly, happened to be in the hallway that afternoon and saw Donna coming out. Carmen did not know who she was at first. She saw a woman in her mid-50s carrying what appeared to be a bag, leaving my apartment with the door key still in her hand. Carmen asked if everything was all right. Donna told her she was my mother and that she was just taking care of a few things while I was in the hospital. Carmen said okay and went about her day. But she felt uneasy enough about it that she mentioned it to me when I was recovered enough to talk properly, and that mention was the thread I pulled that unraveled the whole thing. I came home on a Tuesday. Carmen picked me up from the hospital because she had offered and I had gratefully accepted. I was still weak, still on oral antibiotics, still moving slowly and carefully the way you do when your body has just been through something real. The drive home was quiet and good. Carmen talked a little about her garden and her grandchildren, and I mostly listened with my eyes half closed, grateful for normalcy. When we got to my building, she helped me with my bag. She walked me to my door, and right before she left, she said casually, the way you mentioned something that is probably nothing, that my mother had been by while I was in the hospital. I stood at my front door with my key in my hand and felt something go cold inside me. I asked Carmen what she meant. Carmen told me what she had seen calmly with the kind of straightforward honesty that older women sometimes offer when they have lived long enough to know that sugarcoating things is rarely kind. A woman in her mid-50s, a bag, my apartment key, more than 2 hours inside. I thanked Carmen and waited until she went back to her own apartment, and then I opened my door and walked in. Everything looked normal at first. That was the unsettling part. It looked normal enough that I almost talked myself out of the cold feeling in my chest. But I have lived in that apartment for over a year by then, and I know it the way you know a room you have arranged yourself, the exact angle of things, the particular order of what lives where, the small private geography of your own space. And things were not right. Small things, but real things. The stack of papers on my desk had been moved. The drawer in my kitchen that I keep miscellaneous documents in was not fully closed. My bedside table drawer was pushed in at a slightly different angle than I always leave it. The box I keep in my closet, a simple shoebox where I store old letters and a few sentimental objects, was on a slightly different shelf than where it always sat. I sat down on my couch and I breathed for a few minutes. Then I called Donna. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting for me to call, which told me she was already prepared. I asked her if she had been to my apartment while I was in the hospital. She said yes immediately without apology, with a kind of flat confidence that she uses when she has already decided she has done nothing wrong. She said she was worried. She said she needed to make sure everything was okay. She said she had driven 3 hours because she was my mother and that was what mothers did. She said she had watered my plants, which is true because my small succulent collection on the windowsill was not overwatered. She said she had made sure the stove was off and the windows were latched. And then she said in that same flat, confident voice that she had also taken a few things home with her to keep safe while I was in the hospital. I asked her what things. She listed them in a tone that suggested she expected me to be grateful. A small envelope of cash I kept in my desk drawer for emergencies, which was about $400. A piece of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother on my father's side and that I had received from my aunt years ago. A bracelet, gold with a small ruby clasp. A folder of documents she described as important papers that she did not want anything to happen to. And a small digital camera, an older model I had owned for years and used to photograph things I cared about. I did not raise my voice. I want to say that clearly because it is true and it matters. I sat on my couch with my phone against my ear and I said quietly that none of those things were hers to take. I said she had entered my home without my permission. I said the cash was mine and the bracelet was mine and whatever was in that folder was mine and the camera was mine and I needed all of it back. She said she was keeping them safe. She said she did not trust that the building was secure. She said the bracelet had sentimental value and she wanted to protect it. She said it as if protecting my things from me was a reasonable thing to do. And somewhere underneath all of that, underneath the logic and the justification and the confident flat voice, I could hear the real message. I could hear her saying, "Nothing is truly yours if I decide it is not." I told her I would call her back and I hung up. I sat in my apartment, which felt different now, which felt less mine than it had an hour ago, and I thought about what had just happened. My body was still physically recovering. I was supposed to rest, drink fluids, take my medication, sleep. But my mind was completely awake in a way that exhaustion could not touch because something inside me had shifted into a clear, still, focused mode that I had not been in before. I had been hurt by Donna many times over many years, but this was different. This was not a comment about my life choices or a guilt trip over a holiday. This was her walking into the space I had built, going through my private things and taking what she wanted while I was sick in a hospital bed, unable to stop her. And the way she talked about it, without any hesitation, without any shame, told me that she had not done this by accident. She had done this because some part of her believed she was allowed to. I called Carmen that evening. I asked her everything she remembered. I took notes. I asked if she would be willing to write down what she had seen in a simple statement, and Carmen, who is practical and kind and unbothered by being asked direct things, said yes without any drama. Then I went to Gerald's office the next morning, still pale and moving carefully, and I asked him to explain to me how someone had gotten into my apartment without my permission. Gerald was visibly uncomfortable. He explained the situation. He described Donna as worried and convincing and motherly. He said he had not thought it was a problem because she was family. I asked him whether my lease said anything about family members having access to my unit without my authorization. He looked at the lease. He said no. I asked him to note the incident in writing and to make clear that no one was to be given access to my unit in the future under any circumstances without my explicit permission in writing. Gerald wrote a statement. He apologized sincerely. He was embarrassed and cooperative, and I did not make it ugly because there was no reason to. He had made a mistake in judgment, and he acknowledged it. I filed the statement in the folder of documents I was building, because I had already decided that I was going to document everything carefully, not because I knew exactly what I would do with it yet, but because I had learned from years of dealing with Donna that the version of events she told was almost never the version that had actually happened, and if the day came when I needed proof, I intended to have it. I texted Donna that week to tell her I needed my things returned. I kept the text simple and direct. I said, I need the cash, the bracelet, the documents, and the camera returned to me. Please let me know when you can bring them or I can arrange to have them picked up. She replied the next day. Her reply was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph was about how worried she had been. The second paragraph was about how she had always done everything for me. The third paragraph said she would return the items when she felt I was in the right mindset to appreciate them properly. I read that reply several times. I saved it. I read the last line again. When she felt I was in the right mindset to appreciate them properly. Not when she got around to it, not when it was convenient. When she felt I was ready. My belongings held as an emotional leverage point until my emotions satisfied her requirements. That was the sentence that made something in me go very quiet and very certain. I want to tell you, out the folder of documents she had taken because that turned out to be the most important part of the story, and it is the part that changed everything. The folder she described as important papers was a dark blue folder I kept in my kitchen drawer. It contained several things. There was a copy of my lease, there was my car insurance card, there was a personal letter from my aunt, the one who had given me the bracelet, written years ago and deeply private, and there was something else. There was a copy of an agreement I had made 2 years earlier with a small business development group, an agreement that gave me partial ownership rights in a small catering and event supply company I had helped build as a side project. It was not a huge thing at the time. I had put in money and time and organizational work, and in return I had a 12% ownership stake in a company called Harvest Table Co. I had not told Donna about it because it was early, because I was cautious about announcing things before they were real, and because I had learned that announcing good things to Donna meant surrendering partial credit for them before they even fully existed. Harvest Table Co. had been doing well. In the 18 months before I got sick, the company had started to grow in a real way. The owner, a woman named Reese who had started the catering arm from her home kitchen and was one of the most driven people I had ever met, had secured 3 corporate accounts and a recurring university event contract. My 12% stake was starting to mean something. Not life-changing money yet, but real money, and the trajectory was pointing upward. The document Donna had taken was the original signed copy of my ownership agreement. When I realized which document was in that folder, I called Reese. I told her what had happened. Reese is practical and sharp and has zero patience for drama that costs her business, but she is also someone who genuinely respects me and what I had contributed. She listened to the whole story without interrupting. When I finished, she said 2 things. The first thing she said was that I needed to get that document back or have it properly re-executed because a copy was worth less than an original in certain dispute scenarios. The second thing she said was that the business was currently in a conversation with a regional event management company about a potential acquisition, and that if the acquisition went through, my 12% would be worth a meaningful sum. She said the number quietly, in the way people say significant numbers, and I wrote it down and stared at it for a long time. I did not tell Donna about any of this. I need you to understand that clearly. Donna did not know what was in that folder beyond her own description of it as important papers. She had taken it because she takes things. That is who she is. She collects access to things that are not hers because having access makes her feel powerful and informed and central. She had taken my documents the same way she had taken my emergency cash and my grandmother's bracelet, as a reflexive act of claiming territory. She did not know what she was holding, but I now had a real, practical, financial reason to retrieve those documents beyond the emotional principle, and that changed the shape of what I was willing to do. I gave Donna one more chance to return everything voluntarily. I called her on a Sunday and I spoke calmly and I said that I understood she had acted out of worry and that I did not want this to become a bigger situation than it needed to be, but that I needed my belongings back this week. She said she would think about it. She said the bracelet was better off with her because she understood its value. She said she had only ever wanted to protect me. She said perhaps if I came to visit, we could talk about everything, and I thought about what that visit would look like, the way she would arrange the furniture of that conversation so that by the end of it I was apologizing for being upset and she was the aggrieved party, and I said no. I said I was not coming to visit. I said I was asking her one more time to return my things, and that if she did not, I would take next steps. She hung up, not angrily, just cleanly, the way she ends conversations when she has decided the conversation is over. I sat with the phone in my hand and I thought about what next steps actually meant. I had never used that phrase with her before. I had always retreated before the point where next steps became necessary, but something was different now. I was different now. I had been sick and alone and then had come home to find that my private space had been invaded, my belongings taken, and my mother entirely unapologetic about any of it. I was 30 years old by then. I was financially stable. I was healthier than I had been in years, slowly, day by day, and I was done, not done in a dramatic way, done in the quiet, clear, certain way that comes after you have finally seen the whole pattern laid out in front of you, and you cannot pretend you did not see it. I consulted a tenant rights organization to understand my standing regarding the unauthorized access to my apartment. The answer was clear. What had happened was unauthorized entry. Whether it rose to the level of a formal legal matter depended on what had been taken and what I wanted to do about it. I also had a brief consultation with a lawyer, a woman in my city who offered initial consultations at low cost. She told me that the combination of the unauthorized entry, the witness statement from Carmen, Gerald's written statement, and the removed belongings gave me a real basis to formally demand return of my property and potentially pursue more if Donna refused. She said a formal letter from her office would likely be enough to prompt action without going further, because most people, when they receive a letter on legal letterhead, understand that the situation has changed. The lawyer sent the letter. It was professional, precise, and non-aggressive in tone. It described the date and nature of the unauthorized entry, cited the witness accounts, listed the items removed, and formally requested their return within 10 days. It was also copied at the lawyer's suggestion to Donna's home address and to a secondary address, which was the address of my aunt, my father's sister, the one who had given me the bracelet. That secondary copy was not punitive. It was because the bracelet had originally been my aunt's to give, and the lawyer had noted that depending on how the bracelet had been passed down, my aunt might have an independent interest in its proper custody. I had not planned to involve my aunt, but once the lawyer raised it, I reached out to her directly and explained what had happened. My aunt, whose name is Miriam and who is a quiet, principled woman in her early 60s, listened to the entire story. There was a long pause after I finished. Then she said she wanted to be very clear that the bracelet had been given to me specifically, not to the family in general and certainly not to my mother, and that she would be contacting Donna herself to say so. I thanked her and did not ask her to do more than that, but Miriam had her own feelings about Donna that long predated this moment, and I suspect her call to Donna was significantly more direct than anything I would have said. I received a phone call from Donna 4 days after the lawyer's letter was delivered. This was not the normal Donna voice. This was a different register, lower and tighter and more careful, the voice she used when she was backed against a wall and calculating how to get out. She said she had received a letter. She said she did not appreciate being contacted by a lawyer over a family matter. She said she had only ever wanted to help me. She said she had not realized the folder was important, which was a lie because she had told me herself it contained important papers, using that exact phrase. She said the bracelet had sentimental value and she had wanted to keep it safe. And then, after all of that, she said she was willing to return the items if I dropped the legal business and we could talk about this like family. I said I was happy to talk like family once my belongings were returned. I said the legal process would remain in place until the items were in my hands. I said I would be available to receive them on Saturday afternoon at a neutral location, a coffee shop near her city that I had chosen because it was public. She did not like that. She wanted me to come to her house, which would have meant her on her territory, her furniture, her kitchen table, all the psychological architecture of a space she controlled completely. I said the coffee shop or a delivery service, her choice. She chose the coffee shop. She arrived 15 minutes late, which I understood as deliberate. I was already sitting at a table with a glass of water when she came in. She sat down across from me and placed a canvas bag on the table. She had brought everything. The cash was in an envelope. The bracelet was in a small jewelry pouch. The documents folder was intact. The camera was wrapped in a cloth. She sat with her hands folded on the table and looked at me with the expression she used when she was trying to make me feel guilty for having a backbone. The expression that communicated disappointment without saying so, that implied I was being cold and ungrateful and not the daughter she had raised. I took the bag, I opened the folder and checked the document. It was there. I checked the bracelet. It was there. I counted the cash and it was all there. I placed the bag carefully on the seat beside me. And then I looked at Donna and I said what I had been organizing in my mind for several days. I said that I knew she believed she had been helping. I said I knew she did not see what she had done as a violation. I said I also knew that S was not the first time she had treated my life as something she had a right to access and manage without my permission, and that I was done pretending I did not see the pattern. I said I loved her and I was not willing to have her removed from my life entirely, but that the relationship between us needed to change in specific ways, and that I was going to describe those ways now. She started to speak. I kept going. I said I would not be giving her access to my home ever in any form. I said I would not be sharing financial information with her, business information, or details about any legal or professional arrangements in my life. I said I would visit a few times a year and I would call on a reasonable schedule, but I would not be available on demand, and I would not be accepting guilt as a form of communication. I said that if she chose to maintain a relationship with me under those terms, I was genuinely glad for that and I meant it. And I said that if she chose to reject those terms and use silence or anger as a punishment, I would accept that decision calmly and wait until she was ready to try a different way. Donna stared at me. I watched something move across her face, the automatic startup of the crying she used when she wanted to redirect a conversation through emotion. I waited. I did not reach across the table. I did not soften. I did not rush to reassure her. I sat and I waited, and the crying that started stayed small because she could see that it was not working, and somewhere behind her eyes something recalculated. She said I had hurt her. I said I understood that. She said I was treating her like a stranger. I said I was treating her like someone who needed clear boundaries in order for our relationship to be healthy and that there was a difference. She said she did not know what had happened to me. I said I had grown up. We sat in that coffee shop for about 30 minutes total. She drank most of her coffee. I drank my water. When she left, she hugged me tightly in the parking lot, the kind of hug that has desperation in it, and I hugged her back because I genuinely did not hate her. I just could not be managed by her anymore. I drove home with the canvas bag on the passenger seat and the document folder sitting on top of everything else, and I felt the particular kind of exhausted that comes not from doing something hard, but from having finally done something necessary. I want to tell you about the months that followed because they are important. Donna did not speak to me for 6 weeks after the coffee shop meeting. I had expected some version of this. The silence was her punishment, the way she had always punished me for not complying by withdrawing the warmth that I had trained myself to seek. The difference this time was that I sat inside the silence and I did not panic. I checked my phone with normal frequency. I did not call her to apologize for having been honest. I did not send reassuring messages. I let the silence be what it was, which was her processing the fact that the old tools no longer worked. During those 6 weeks, I focused on getting fully healthy, getting back to work, and following through on what was happening with Harvest Table Co. The acquisition conversations Reese had mentioned were progressing. I spoke to Reese twice a month through that period. She kept me informed. The regional event management company was serious. They had been doing due diligence for 2 months. By early spring, the picture was becoming clearer. I also, during that time, allowed myself to actually process what I had been through. I had a therapist I saw occasionally, a woman I had found a year earlier when I realized I could not keep explaining my family dynamic to friends and expecting them to have the tools to help. My therapist is practical and does not traffic in blame, which I appreciated. She helped me see something clearly that I had been circling around for months. She said that the hospital incident had been hard and violating, but that in a strange way it had also been a gift. She said it had removed the ambiguity. She said that for years I had been able to maintain a version of my relationship with Donna that involved a lot of chosen ignorance, a kind of deliberate not quite seeing of the full pattern. The hospital incident had taken that option away. I had seen the full pattern, I could not unsee it. And now I had to decide what I wanted to do with the person I actually was, not the person I had been performing to keep the peace. She was right about that, and the decision I made in those 6 weeks of silence was quieter than I expected it to be. It was not a dramatic resolution. It was simply a settling. I was going to live my life. I was going to protect my space. I was going to be kind where I could and firm where I needed to be. I was not going to carry the weight of Donna's emotional management as a primary responsibility anymore. I was going to be her daughter, genuine, Ely, and with real feeling, but I was not going to be her property. Donna called on a Sunday in early March. She called like nothing had happened, with the slightly too cheerful voice she used when she was attempting a reset without an apology. She asked how I was feeling, she asked about work, she mentioned her neighbor's new dog. I answered everything pleasantly and briefly. I did not perform warmth I did not feel, but I did not perform coldness either. I was just present, calm, real. At the end of the call, she said carefully that she had been thinking about what I said at the coffee shop. She said she was not sure she agreed with all of it, but she said she did not want to lose me entirely. I said I did not want that either. I said we could try. And we left it there, which was not everything, but it was something real, which was more than we had ever had before. Now I want to tell you the part of the story that I did not fully expect. In April, Reese called me with the number. The acquisition had been completed. The regional company had purchased Harvest Table Co. at a valuation that made my 12% stake worth a sum that was, for me, genuinely significant. Not retire on a beach money, but pay off debts and have a cushion money. Buy a real car money. Put a down payment on something real money. I sat at my kitchen table after the call and I thought about the folder Donna had taken. The ownership agreement document that had been sitting in her house for 3 weeks while I recovered from being sick. If I had not known what she had, if I had not been paying attention, if I had folded back into the old pattern of avoiding conflict to keep her comfortable, that document might still be with her when the acquisition conversation became real. I am not saying Donna knew about the business or the acquisition. I genuinely do not believe she did. But I am saying that her pattern of collecting access to my life had this time included something with real value. And my choice to finally, clearly, firmly demand it back had protected something that mattered not just emotionally but practically. That is how things work sometimes. The act of finally protecting your own life turns out to protect something specific and real that you did not even know was at stake. I celebrated quietly, dinner with Carmen and a bottle of wine I had been saving, a video call with Miriam, who was genuinely happy for me in the uncomplicated way that she has about her, a long walk in my neighborhood in the early spring cold, thinking about the apartment I had built and the documents that were safely back in the dark blue folder in my kitchen drawer and the woman I had turned out to be after everything. I did not tell Donna about the acquisition for 2 months. When I finally mentioned it briefly in a phone call, I said only that the small business investment I had been part of had worked out. She said that was nice. She asked if I needed anything. I said no. She did not ask for details and I did not offer them. That was new. That was the shape of our new relationship, which had less in it than the old one, but also less damage. I want to come back to the apartment because the apartment is where the story starts, and it is right that it should also be where it ends. I repainted one of the walls in my living room in the spring, a deep blue-green color that I had been thinking about for a while. I hung more of my own photographs, images I had taken with the camera that Donna had temporarily and misguidedly claimed. I bought a new plant for the windowsill, something larger and leafier that needed more light than the succulents. I made the space more mine than it had ever been, not because it needed defending anymore, but because it was genuinely mine, and I wanted to enjoy that without apology. Carmen came for dinner twice that spring. She's the kind of person who fills a room with easy good feeling and who does not require you to perform anything other than honesty, which is a rare and valuable quality in a neighbor and a person. She asked me once over dinner whether I had forgiven my mother. I thought about that honestly before answering. I said I did not think forgiveness was the right word for what I was doing. I said I had accepted who my mother was. I said I had stopped waiting for her to be different. I said I had decided that my love for her did not have to mean unlimited access to my life, and that separating those two things, the love and the access, had actually made the love feel cleaner than it had in years. Carmen thought about that and said it sounded right to her. I think it was. The relationship with Donna exists now in a form that I manage carefully and honestly. We talk on the phone roughly twice a month. We have seen each other 3 times in the year since the coffee shop meeting. The visits are shorter and more structured and considerably less exhausting. She has not asked to visit my apartment again. I think some part of her understands that the architecture of our relationship has changed permanently, and that the architecture I have built will not be moved by tears or silence or waiting. It is not a cold relationship. It has warmth in it, but the warmth is real now, not performed. It is what is actually there between us when everything that was obligation and guilt and management has been cleared away, and what is actually there is not nothing. It is not very much, but it is not nothing. I think about the woman who drove 3 hours to let herself into her adult daughter's apartment while that daughter was hospitalized. I think about what she believed she was doing. I think she believed she was being a mother. I think she believed that the rules of access that applied to other people's private lives simply did not apply between her and me because I was hers. And I think that belief, the belief that your child belongs to you in a way that never expires, is something that she will probably carry her whole life. I cannot remove it. I cannot reason it away. I can only hold my own borders clearly enough that it no longer has anywhere to land. What I can tell you, sitting here on the other side of that hospital room and that break-in and that coffee shop and that acquisition and all the quiet months in between, is that something is different in me now. I do not feel the old guilt the same way. When Donna calls and uses the slightly aggrieved tone, I recognize it as a sound that no longer has power over me, and I keep talking normally anyway. When I do something good in my life, I do not feel the need to report it to her as proof that I am worth the trouble I cause by having boundaries. I am not building my life for anyone's approval. I am building it for the simple reason that it is mine and I am in it and I intend to live it well. If you are reading this and you recognize some version of this story in your own life, I want to say something real to you. The guilt you feel when you set a limit with someone who has decided they are entitled to unlimited access to you, that guilt is not proof that you are wrong. That guilt is the old training showing up on schedule. You do not have to act on it. You can feel the guilt and still hold your ground. You can love someone and still refuse to let them manage your life. You can be a good daughter, a good son, a good sibling, a good person, and still say clearly and without apology, "This is my life and these are my walls and I am not moving them." That is not coldness. That is dignity. And the people who try to tell you those two things are the same have a reason for wanting you to believe it. I kept the bracelet on my bedside table for a while after I got it back. Not because I wore it often, but because seeing it there in the morning reminded me of something. It reminded me of Miriam, who gave it freely and without strings. It reminded me of what it felt like to receive something from someone who genuinely wanted you to have it. And it reminded me that what Donna had done when she took it, even if she would never understand this, was the opposite of that. To take a thing from someone who already owns it and call the taking protection is not love. It is the story love tells itself when it has never learned the difference between care and control. I am 31 now. I have a home that is mine. I have a career that I built. I have money in the bank that I earned. I have a neighbor who brought me soup when I was sick and picked me up from the hospital without being asked. I have a business stake that paid off. I have a mother who is difficult and human and gradually learning, slowly and imperfectly, that her daughter is not going to disappear just because she will not be managed. I have an aunt who called someone out on my behalf without hesitation. I have myself, which is the most important thing, which is the thing I almost gave away 100 times in 100 small surrenders, and which I am not giving away again. If this story reached something in you, I want to ask you one genuine question before you go. Has someone in your life ever used love as a reason to take something from you, your space, your peace, your time, your decisions, your credit, or your sense of what belongs to you? Drop your answer in the comments. Not because it will fix anything, but because sometimes the most important thing is to say it out loud in a place where someone is actually listening.